Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show, guys, is an absolute honour, and I'm very, very excited. I was contacted about 3, possibly 4 months ago by an author and now close friend who goes by the name S.Binx, and fantastic guy, guys. Really talented author. He contacted me with a story that's actually been sort of a family story handed down by generation and generation, and it's got quite a tragic surrounding to this. So this particular story is an adaptation of an old family story written by Binx's great-grandfather. He actually turned to writing after fighting in the First World War. Now it's based upon that story, but it was never published in a local bookstore. The reason for that was because the house was actually hit in the Second World War bomb blitz, and all of the unpublished stories were lost, I'm afraid. So quite a tragic end. So what happened is Binx's grandfather used to tell this to him as a child in the evenings as he was trying to settle him down for bed and what have to entertain him, and it became sort of family traditional story. And Binx has taken that story and just sort of revamped it and gave it his own very personal touch. As I say, absolutely honoured to feature it on the channel. Thank you ever so much, buddy. Guys and girls, please do, of course, let us know down below what you think. Of course, please do like and share. And without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, sent in by S.Binx, entitled The Hunters Guild, entry, The Roman Werewolf. Let's get straight into that. On a chilling autumn's morning, a Roman soldier was eager to return home after many years of war. On his journey, he came across the ancient woodland that lay before his home. A feeling of joy hit him as the charm of the woods enticed him to pass through. The first day of his journey had proven to be delightful, as the soldier was seemingly captivated by the sound of birds singing in the canopy that sat above the endless columns of pine trees. As the short hours of sunlight faded and the chill of the autumn breeze creeped in, the soldier deemed it time to settle down for the night. After finding a large moss-covered tree, he set up his bedroll and built a small fire as he gathered and rationed food he had assigned for that evening. Partway through the night, the soldier was woken up by a soft sobbing in the distance. He gingerly reached for his sword, but after a few minutes, the sobbing slowly wisped away from his camp until he could no longer hear it. For the rest of the night, he slept with one eye open. The next morning, after a troubled night's sleep, the soldier awoke to a higher level of intent and desire to put distance between himself and whatever he had heard. As the day went on, it began raining heavily, so the soldier, comfortable with the distance he had made, built himself a shelter for the evening. It took him a little longer to find rest with the thoughts of the previous night in mind, but eventually he dozed into a quiet sleep. His rest was short-lived, as what seemed like moments later, he awoke to a sobbing that sounded like it was right outside his camp. In a rush of fear, the soldier grabbed his sword and crawled out of his shelter to find the back of a ragged woman sitting beside the fire with her head drooped into her hands. The soldier, realizing his mistake, asked her what was wrong, but to no answer. He began to slowly approach. He reached out to grab her shoulder. When she turned around, her chin was dripping with blood as the glow from the fire lit her face, her hand clutching the remnants of a partly eaten arm. The soldier was horrified. He began to stumble.
"Run!"
she muttered.
"Please! Please run!"
As she spoke, she revealed a set of jagged teeth, but before he could reply, she slipped back into the darkness. The soldier turned and took off into the night with just his sword in hand. He ran until his lungs burned and his feet hounded with pain, but as the first light of dawn starred the horizon, he found himself stumbling down the path again. The third day was bright and calm, but the soldier, rattled and sleepless, failed to notice the beauty he had previously admired. He moved as fast as he could, trying to get through the forest before night fell. But to no avail as darkness began to fall once more. Turning down a beaten old path that led off the road, he spotted an old, moss-covered cabin. Assuring himself that it would be a good place to bunker down for the night, the soldier climbed the old steps to the cabin door. After surveying the cabin, he spent the last few moments of daylight blocking the doors and the windows with what was left of the furnishings, so that nothing would get in. Despite his preparations, he could not sleep. He sat in what was used to be the cabin's bedroom, staring at the barricaded door and nervously tapping his blade. Eventually, he couldn't keep his eyes open any longer and fell asleep. This time he awoke to a pungent stench of urine and putrefying blood, followed by a deep, predatory growl from the other side of the barricaded room. His thoughts turned to the woman from the previous nights, but he refused to believe it was her. Knowing he would be trapped, the soldier burst through the door to find the ragged woman had become a monstrous creature, coated with a thick layer of long, dark, wiry hair and muscular, elongated limbs. Its head resembled a wolf's, but with a shorter, disfigured snout and jaw. The creature had a damp, musty look, as if a dog had just come in from the rain. Terrified by what stood before him, and with no way of escaping, he began to recklessly swing his sword, but the cuts from the steel were gone instantaneously, as if from magic. His persistence only proved to anger the beast further. The soldier lunged at the monster, but his weapon was ripped from his hand before he could strike. With no way to defend himself, and the beast closing in on him, he made a last-ditch attempt as he ripped his silver brooch that pinned his cape and plunged it into the creature's side, drawing a scream of pain from the monster, who proceeded to leap through the tattered window of the cabin, disappearing into the night. The ordeal was over. The ragged creature was gone. The soldier did not sleep that night, and the next day he pushed his exhausted body through the woods, and as sun began to set, he reached the edge of the forest to see the faint clouds of smoke rising from the farmhouse in the valley below. His farmhouse. The wildflowers growing along the border of the forest were swaying in the chilling breeze. The hint of frost lingered with intention. The soldier knew that this autumn would be a cold one. Night settled over his first month at home. The soldier was on his way to check his livestock for the night. As he got to the end of his path, he saw what appeared to be his ram. His peaceful mind quickly turned to the shock as he saw that his ram was missing its head. At that moment, his smell of putrid blood and a gust of warm, stagnant breath came from behind his ear. His body was frozen and he shuddered. His legs, feeling weak under his weight, managed to turn his body to face the beast, but he was only able to utter a handful of whims. No, fuck! Before he could finish, the beast ripped into his chest with a shattering blow from its claws. The soldier hit the ground with a harsh thud. He lay there, helpless, as the werewolf set upon his throat, ripping at his body as it shook him, and eventually the soldier's face flowed with blood and his straining eyes went glossy and cold. The beast lifted from his corpse with what remained of the man's neck in its bloodied mouth. That night, the werewolf savaged the soldier's family. It battered down the farmhouse door and slaughtered his wife and 14-year-old boy. Only his youngest son of 10, who hid amongst the rafters, was able to survive. When morning came, 2 traders from the nearest settlement, who had been returning home, came across a pen of slaughtered sheep. As they rode up to the paddock border, the mangled body of the soldier had been dragged across to the pathway. His guts were splayed and his arms and left leg severed. "That's Marius," said the first man as he dismounted, tying his mare to the paddock fence. "Father said he'd only returned 1 month past," replied the other, as he too hitched his horse. The two traders looked at each other as they wearily continued towards the cottage. There they were met with what remained of the soldier's family, and the boy, who had hid, was now sitting in a far corner, clutching his father's sword. "Hey," spoke one of the men as he got down on one knee. "It's all right. Tell me what happened. It's okay. Whatever it is, whatever it was, it's gone now. You can come with us. We'll take you to your family." The man standing uttered, "Who, Atticus? His family are in pieces." "Silence. You're not helping," replied the first man. "I'm just saying." "Well, don't." "Where can we take him then? He can't stay at Oak Hill with us." "I know," uttered the first farmhand, "but we must take him somewhere." The man turned back to the frightened boy. "Hey," he spoke softly, "have you got an uncle or an aunt? Are they far?" The boy slowly but surely nodded. "See? He has family." "Yes, okay, just hurry up and get him. We have to get home to father before nightfall," replied the second man. The first man leaned towards the young boy. "We're going to take you to our father, Atticus." "No, father will want to see him, and besides, we don't know where his family reside." The man turned back to the frightened boy. "We need to get you to our father's estate. You will be safe there. Once we have daylight again, we can begin taking you to your uncle. Okay?" The boy replied with another nod. My name is Marcus. But father called me Marco," spoke the boy. "All right then, Marco. I'm Atticus, and this is my brother Lucius," proclaimed the first man. "Put down the sword and let's go." Marco slid back hard into the wall, gripping the sword tighter. Okay, responded Atticus, his tone softening. "You can bring the sword." "Wait, I need to find something first." "Okay then," said Atticus as he rose to his feet. "We will give you a moment to gather your belongings." Lucius stepped to his brother and with a whisper, "What do we tell him? What if he asks? What if he saw it? You know what father said, it comes after whoever survives. It comes after whoever survives, and there's still 2 nights of the full moon. Look, we said we'd get him to his uncle. Until then, we have to do right by him," replied Atticus in a calm tone. He continued, "Father always spoke well of Marius, said he was a veteran in a legion. It would be ill in the eyes of the gods to leave his boy to the terrible fate this family has suffered." "I can't find it," murmured Marco as he returned to the 2 brothers. The 3 returned to the horses, where the boy suddenly fell to his knees at the sight of his dismembered father. Lucius stopped and looked back at the scruffy, sobbing child. "Come, Marco, we need to get you back before the sun sets." Marco struggled to his feet, still holding his father's gladius. He ran over to the mangled body, snatching at something amongst the tattered and blood-soaked clothes. "We need to make haste, Marco. Our father will want to see you before the evening meal." "I'm ready," he said. They made it to the farmstead. The red autumn sun slid back over the windswept horizon, giving way to the cold glow of the full moon. The 3 dismounted. Marco could see that the farm was no farm, but an extensive village with at least 60 residents. There was a market with stalls leading up the main road, various other shops dotted around the edge of the tall stone and wooden beam wall. At the base of this wall, violet flowers swayed in the cold breeze. The main estate was at the very top of the hill and was crowned with what was quite an impressive old oak tree. Servants came over immediately and took the steeds back to their stables. Marco watched as one by one the other workers and the local peasants stared at him, only to hurry back to their homes. Marco was confused, and in his head he was trying to understand why everyone was looking at him. Was it the dried blood on his clothes? Then, as soon as his mind wandered, he was snapped back by the voice of Lucius. "This way, Marco. My father will be expecting us." The two men escorted the boy to the estate courtyard, where there sat an older man. His short but shaped beard was grey, and his receding hair was none the less plush and well groomed. He was entertaining himself with a book entitled The Conquest of Britannia. "Father," a warm smile drew across the elder man's face as he withdrew from his reading. "Ah, so my son's return! Have we made any progress with the Merchants' Guild in Rogovan?" He then sat his gaze upon the young boy. "And who's this young man you have brought to me? Come now, what is your name, son?" "We found him on our return. His is—" "Ah, yes, Marcos, youngest son of Marius. My, you were only this tall when I last saw you." Gesturing with his hand to a considerably shorter height. "Perhaps you remember me. My name is Magnus. Your father served under me many years ago in the Legion. And I see you have met my sons Atticus and Lucius." The boy nodded his head in agreement. "Ah, but enough reminiscing. You must be hungry and in need of new clothes." He turned to the housemaid, whom was patiently waiting several yards behind. "Come, take the young Marcus and bath him. Find some of my son's old clothes that will suffice, and bring him to the dining room." With a nod of her head and a small respectful bow, the maid led the young boy back into the household. Once the maid and Marcus were out of earshot, the warm smile turned to a stern expression of cold waiting, much like that of a general receiving battle reports. "What did you find, Atticus?" His voice was calm and void of emotion. "We were on our way back from Rogovan when we passed Marius's farmstead. The wolf must have come down from the forest. All his stock were butchered." "And Marius, what of him?" Lucius took a step forward. "Everyone was killed, father. We found what was left of Marius strewn across the pathway. The body of his wife and eldest boy were found inside the house. That is also where we found young Marcus. He had this." Lucius held out the sword Marco had refused to let go of, until Lucius protested of being stabbed in the back whenever the horse began to trot. "Ah, yes," replied Magnus, reaching out to take the sword. "A centurion's gladius, a fine weapon. The very one I presented to Marius after he led his men and took back Hadrian's wall. I am glad to see he brought it home from service." He pondered for a moment. His weathered hands became young again, as they perfectly demonstrated how to grasp such a weapon. "But how does a boy, barely old enough to swing such a sword, survive whilst his family are murdered?" "He said he hid in the rafters." "Shame. Marius came to see me not 3 weeks ago. He told me of the creature in the forest. He said its flesh burned at the touch of a silver cloak pin. The scream it made, he said as soon as he stabbed the creature, it immediately looked drained and only just managed to flee. He believed it had died shortly after." The old man sighed. "Marius was brave, and he always followed his orders. He was an exemplary soldier, but he was a fool to believe his family would be safe in that valley. I pleaded with him to bring them here, in the safety of the walls. With his training and experience, he could have easily served as the captain of my watchmen. But he was adamant that his small farmhouse was all he needed. His family would have been under the protection of our walls now. It seems it will only be his son who will benefit from my grace." Atticus pondered for a moment, before finally he spoke up. "Father, what of the boy? Surely he would be better with his uncle." "Agreed. I had no intention of taking him in. His uncle is a horse breeder that supplies our riding mounts. His farm is but a few days north from here." Atticus was gazing upon the full moon sat high over the hills. Its cold glare pierced the shadows of the autumn night. A gust of wind stalked the courtyard, herding dried leaves as they circled the base of the old tree. "Are we both to take the boy?" inquired Atticus, his eyes returning to their conversation.
"You both found him. You both have a duty to return him to his family,"
stated the old man. His words brought a sense of resolve that lightened his expression. But this was not for long, as riding on the back of the wind, it came. From the deep, dark distance, a bone-trembling guttural howl echoed throughout the cold abyss. "When, father?" The old man's eyes were fixed on the cold darkness.
"You will both take him in 2 days' time."
Wow, thank you ever so much, S.Binx. Absolutely fantastic writing. As I said, been so excited to feature this on the channel. I'm absolutely honoured, buddy, and thank you so much for your kind support and words of encouragement. And again, I can't thank you enough. I hope I've done the story justice and cannot wait for part 2. Guys and girls, please do let us know down below what you thought. Of course, please do like and share. And remember, above all, be safe, not sorry.